In 1968, David Noodles Aronson, now middle-aged, returns to NYC's Lower East Side after being away for many years. He's drawn back by an odd notice. A local rabbi informs him that a cemetery in his old neighborhood is closing and the graves will be relocated. Noodles stays in a bar run by an old buddy, Fat Mo Gelly, and starts digging into why he was summoned. For a long time, he has been living as Robert Williams, and the letter makes him wary, thinking someone wants him involved in the reburial of his former gang mates, Patrick Patsy Goldberg, Philip Cockeye Stein, and Max Berkovic. Noodles suspects he's being targeted for revenge. Flashbacks to 1920 reveal the boys' rough upbringing in a Jewish area of the Lower East Side. They pretend to work for Bugsy, a young Irish gangster, but Noodles, Patsy, Cockeye, and Dominic have aspirations of independence. Once, while trying to rob a drunkard, their scheme is thwarted by Max, a newcomer who just moved in with his mom. Max snatches the drunk's watch, leaving the boys to deal with a bullying cop, Whitey, aka Fartface. Later, Noodles confronts Max for the watch, but Whitey takes it instead. Recognizing mutual tenacity, Noodles and Max become friends. Although Noodles and Max co-lead their crew, Max's charm often lands him the role of decision-maker. One day, Patsy notices Whitey moving along neighborhood rooftops and decides to tail him. Patsy swiftly figures out that Whitey is visiting their young friend, Peggy, who engages in prostitution. The boys catch Whitey in the act, capturing a photo of him, and Patsy quickly escapes with the film. Whitey gives in to their demands, agreeing to pay them, the new gang in town, the same tribute he pays Bugsy, and to carry out some enforcement tasks for them. They also recover their watch from him and make him fund Noodles and Max's encounter with Peggy. Noodles has long aspired to develop a romantic relationship with Deborah, Fat Mo's sister. Their father, Mr. Gelly, owns the local kosher eatery. While in the restaurant's men's room, Noodles frequently watches her through a small hole in the wall as she practices ballet and changes clothes. Despite Noodles' interest, Deborah largely ignores him, except for a brief, intimate moment they share when the restaurant is closed for Passover. The boys begin to find success in their neighborhood, burglarizing homes and shops and robbing drunk and vulnerable individuals for small, yet significant, amounts of money. When Bugsy learns about a new gang operating without his control, he and his gang assault Noodles and Max outside Deborah's father's restaurant during Passover. Bugsy takes all the money they have and warns them with the threat, "You either work for me or for no one." After the brutal beating, Noodles begs Deborah to let him in, but she refuses. Fearlessly, the boys meet with a local Italian gangster, Al Capuano, and demonstrate an invention by Noodles. This device enables Capuano to reclaim all the smuggled goods that his ship crews discard overboard when intercepted by harbor authorities. During their first use, the invention functions flawlessly, and the boys are thrilled as the goods resurface. Max falls into the water and stays submerged for a suspiciously long time. Fearing he might have drowned, Noodles searches for him and is displeased when Max reappears, having pretended to drown. Noodles is unimpressed. The invention's success brings immense wealth to the boys, earning them 10% of Capuano's profits. They rent a locker at a train station where they stash their cash in a leather briefcase, vowing to access it only together and giving the key to Fat Mo. On their return trip from the station, they are ambushed by Bugsy, this time carrying a gun. Dominic, the gang's youngest member, is shot by Bugsy and dies in Noodles' arms. In response, Noodles stabs Bugsy to death with a switchblade before being confronted by two mounted officers. In a frenzy, Noodles also stabs one officer before being arrested and sentenced to 12 years in prison. His friends come to see him as he is taken to the juvenile detention facility. In 1932, Noodles gets out of jail and is picked up by Max. Max tells him that he and the gang have gone into the funeral business, but the parlor is just a cover for their real operation, bootlegging. This venture has made them wealthy. Max claims they run the finest speakeasy in town, hiding their liquor in the building's steam heating system. Upon Noodles' return, a celebration is thrown where Max introduces him to new allies, Frankie Minoldi and his associate Joe. They want the gang to rob a diamond broker they own in Detroit. During the robbery, the broker's peculiar secretary, Carol, provokes Noodles into attacking her. He complies despite Joe's warning not to harm her. Later, the gang meets with Joe to hand over the diamonds and then kills him and his men under Frankie's orders. Noodles, not knowing Max's arrangement with Frankie to kill Joe, is upset with Max because he believes their crew should be independent and not answer to someone like Frankie. Noodles is also worried Frankie might one day ask either him or Max to betray the other. Max reassures Noodles that such a thing would never occur. While leaving the scene, Noodles recklessly drives their car off a pier into the bay. Everyone except Noodles escapes and resurfaces. After a few tense minutes and concerns he might have been hurt by a nearby dredging machine, Noodles eventually reappears, reminiscent of when Max once tricked him in their youth. In 1933, the group starts helping Jimmy Clean Hands O'Donnell, a local union leader who fights corrupt labor figures, especially Crowning. After saving Jimmy from being burned alive by Crowning's enforcer, Chicken Joe, they offer their support. Initially, Jimmy declines, as he doesn't want to associate with those involved in bootlegging, drugs, or prostitution. The gang then focuses on a labor strike led by a famous police captain, Vincent Aiello. Aiello is being manipulated by factory owners to have his officers protect replacement workers. The gang devises a devious plan to switch Aiello's newborn son, his first boy after 4 daughters, at the hospital. Noodles contacts him right after the switch is discovered, urging him to pull back his officers and let the strike resolve itself. However, Patsy forgets which baby they switched for Aiello's son, losing the switch list with the baby's number. Unfazed, they decide to provide Aiello with a random boy's number from the nursery, callously laughing about the children they'd confused. Meanwhile, as the gang broadens their operations, Noodles rekindles a romance with Deborah. He plans a luxurious getaway for them at a high-end resort in the Hamptons, now out of season. Noodles confesses that his longing to be with Deborah is what kept him going during his prison sentence. Despite his feelings, she remains hesitant to start a romantic relationship and shares her plans to leave for California to chase her acting dreams. On their ride back to the city in a limousine, Noodles hits Deborah. Feeling embarrassed, he instructs the driver to take her home. While he drowns his sadness in alcohol, he meets a young escort named Eve, who reciprocates his feelings and quickly becomes his girlfriend. In his drunken state, he mistakenly calls her Deborah on their first night together. Later that day, Deborah boards a train to California. Noodles, still wearing his tuxedo from the previous night, arrives at the station and watches her from afar as she departs. When he drunkenly shouts her name, Deborah shuts the compartment blind upon recognizing him as the train leaves, abandoning Noodles. After being away for 3 weeks, Noodles rejoins the gang after Cockeye finds him in an opium den in Chinatown, where he was using and lamenting for Deborah. He is taken back to the gang's base, where Max updates him on everything that happened while he was gone. The labor union has bribed the gang and appointed Max as the new leader. While contacting Max and Noodles for help, Jimmy narrowly escapes death from Chicken Joe's drive-by shooting. In response, the gang retaliates by targeting Crowning outside his club, resulting in the deaths of his bodyguards, including Chicken Joe, while Crowning remains unhurt but is rattled. Due to a leg injury, Jimmy is left permanently disabled but continues his profession. As they celebrate with Jimmy at the hospital, his lawyer, Sharky, suggests to the gang that with prohibition possibly ending soon, it might be wise to venture into legitimate business using their fleet of bootlegging trucks, with Jimmy as their frontman. Max is intrigued by this idea, but Noodles remains skeptical, insisting they work for themselves rather than anyone else. Max argues that Noodles' approach is outdated and that they need to grow to increase their profits, but Noodles firmly maintains his street ethics. Meanwhile, Frankie Minoldi is spotted arriving at the hospital to visit Jimmy. A few months later, as Prohibition nears its conclusion, the gang finds themselves without jobs. Noodles and Max take a trip to Florida with their girlfriends, Eve and Carol. Max unveils a bold scheme to rob the Federal Reserve Bank in Manhattan, but Noodles deems it reckless, fully aware it could lead to their demise. Carol, now involved with the brothel managed by Peggy alongside the gang's speakeasy and Max's girlfriend, tries to persuade Noodles to get Max to drop his plan or alert the authorities to detain Max, allowing time for him to reconsider the ridiculousness of the idea. Noodles intends to inform the police about a planned liquor deal between Max, Cockeye, and Patsy, scheduled shortly after the gang's celebration marking the end of Prohibition. In the speakeasy's office, Noodles makes a discreet call to Police Sergeant Halloran, giving him a heads-up about the liquor transaction. Noodles hopes that the impending end of Prohibition will result in the trio's arrest, leading to brief jail sentences and preventing the robbery. After the call, he sits alone in the office for a bit. When Max arrives, Noodles once again advises against going ahead with the bank heist. Max rejects his counsel and accuses Noodles of being a coward. When Noodles calls Max's plan and him crazy, it triggers Max, who violently attacks Noodles. It is later disclosed that the term crazy is highly sensitive for Max due to his father's mental instability and subsequent death in a sanatorium during Max's childhood. On a dreary, rainy night, Noodles arrives at the liquor by sight only to discover that Patsy and Cockeye have been killed, and Max has endured severe burns, making him unrecognizable. Noodles then travels to Chinatown with a newspaper revealing the police ambush and the deaths of his friends, intending to disappear among the residents. Soon after, 4 gangsters come to Noodles' apartment searching for him. They murder Eve after she refuses to disclose his whereabouts. The mobsters then proceed to Fat Mo's apartment, where they torture him until he reveals Noodles' location. After mentioning that they know Noodles informed the police, which led to the deaths of Cockeye, Patsy, and Max. When the gangsters show up at the Opium Den, which is an old movie theater, Noodles is alerted by the owners and manages to evade capture. He then heads to Fat Mo's and eliminates the thug left behind to guard him. After learning from an injured Fat Mo that Eve has passed away and that every member of the gang is searching for him, Noodles, confused about how the gangsters discovered this since he never mentioned alerting the police, collects the key to the train station locker. Upon reaching the station, he discovers the money has been swapped for newspapers. Confused, he purchases a one-way bus ticket to Buffalo and departs. While investigating in 1968, Noodles discovers that his friends have been relocated to another cemetery, where a grand mausoleum has been built for them. When the bronze doors of the mausoleum open, an automated recording plays the same pan flute melody that Cockeye used to play when he was alive. Inside, he finds the key to the locker along with a plaque that indicates he placed the plaque and key there as a tribute to his friends. Noodles unexpectedly runs into the directress of the cemetery. Identifying himself as Robert Williams, he inquires about Mr. Aronson and his involvement in the mausoleum's creation, as well as their correspondence. She explains that aside from his suggestion for the inscription above the bronze doors, "Your youngest and strongest will fall by the sword," and a tape of Cockeye's song, he allowed the architects complete freedom in the design, with the agreement finalized through his offshore bank account. During their chat, Noodles notices he is being followed by a hidden driver of a Cadillac, which speeds off when he approaches. However, he successfully records its license plate number. At the train station locker, he discovers the same leather bag filled with over $1 million. A note inside states, "Advance payment for your next job." Noodles tracks the Cadillac to Christopher Bailey's mansion, the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. Just as he observes it leaving through the front gate, the car suddenly bursts into flames. Later, while at Fat Mo's bar, he sees a news report revealing that Bailey is being investigated for bribery. Several witnesses lined up to testify against him, including the passenger of the now-destroyed Cadillac, a district attorney, have mysteriously died. Noodles believes there might be a link between Bailey and the money left to him. Before heading to Bailey's home for a party invitation, he finds and speaks with the elderly Carol, who now resides in a retirement facility known as the Bailey Foundation. She informs him that Deborah is back in the New York City area and has become a well-known actress. After attending Deborah's Broadway show, Antony and Cleopatra, Noodles goes backstage to talk with her. During their extended chat, he observes that the Cleopatra role suits her perfectly, unlike anyone else he recalls from his past. Deborah reveals that she is in a relationship with Secretary Bailey and that they have an older son, also named David, who resembles Max significantly from his younger days. It turns out that Secretary Bailey is actually Max, who hosts the party that evening, attended by many of New York's elite. At the event, Jimmy confronts Max privately. Jimmy's role as a union leader has become a cover for illegal activities backed by Max. However, their partnership has soured, as Max possesses enough evidence to implicate Jimmy and his associates in front of the corruption committee. He is linked to the assassination of the district attorney and an attempt on his own life, pressuring him to sign over some of his authority in return for ensuring David's financial safety and security. As Jimmy departs, he suggests that Max might want to avoid being murdered by ending his own life, which Max seems to somewhat agree with. Noodles arrives at the gathering and is taken to Max's office. Max discloses that, with Jimmy's aid and some corrupt police officers, he staged his own death during a liquor deal where he was supposedly killed. For the past 30 years, he has been living under the Bailey identity as a cover. With the threat of an assassination linked to an upcoming inquiry, Max tells Noodles that he is the only one he would permit to kill him. This is tied to the money and the mysterious note in the suitcase, as Max took away Noodles' most important treasures, the gang's cash and Deborah. Noodles declines the proposal and insists on not recognizing Max as alive, calling him Secretary Bailey or Mr. Bailey. He confides that he feels betrayed and has carried guilt throughout Max's absence, which he considers to be enough punishment. He exits through a hidden door from Bailey's office. Outside Bailey's estate, Noodles spots Bailey along the roadside. A garbage truck, which he had noted during his earlier surveillance of the mansion, passes by, its augers visible. After the truck rolls past, Bailey disappears, hinting that he may have thrown himself into the truck's blades. As Noodles watches the red lights of the truck fade down the street, they magically switch to white, transforming into the headlights of 1930s cars driving alongside Bailey's mansion, playing God Bless America by Kate Smith, reminiscent of celebrations marking the end of Prohibition. Noodles then turns and walks away into the night, alone. The film concludes in 1933, with Noodles visiting a Chinese opium den right after the death of his friends. After taking a few puffs from an opium pipe, he reclines and grins as the end credits begin to play. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Take care.